Okay, welcome everybody. There are a few seats left. They're kind of interspersed. There's a couple over there. There's one there. If you guys want to make your way down, you're welcome to. There's one here next to me, or not. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Hadrian Predock. I'm the director of the undergraduate programs in architecture here at USC. And I'm super excited to be able to welcome and host Jimenez and Joanna Grant tonight. At least from my perspective, the past 10 years has been a head-spinning wild ride for Bureau Spectacular. Jimenez rapid ascendance to one of the most important figures of the generational wave sweeping through architecture was catapulted by Citizens of No Place, an architectural graphic novel. This intricate meditation on the discipline, representation, and meaning was the beginning of an end to prior architectures and opened up a series of conceptual portals that have produced a huge amount of influence on an emerging generation of architects and the academic field. Joanna Grant has been along for much of this crazy ride as Jimenez partner, both in crime and in life. Grant took a brief detour to finish her infamous thesis at Princeton, and now we are lucky to have her as part of our faculty at USC. We are lucky to have both of them in Los Angeles. Bureau Spectacular is, as Jimenez and Joanna state, a cultural enterprise. Their combined practices and positions in architecture are expanding the boundaries we thought we knew. Books, objects, furniture, models, comics, films, and buildings are all equal targets and equally considered in producing a disciplinary framework. Their work is often transgressive and driven by nonlinear narratives that conflate architecture with nature, urban metabolism, bodily fluids, and even sex. To borrow Dean Curry's term, they are citizen architects, no doubt, but an unconventional group of citizens who recognize and exploit the strange and wonderful contemporary set of cultures we all cohabit. Jimenez is originally from Taiwan, but a nomadic global citizen. Joanna is from a small town in Kentucky who knows how to handle both firearms and theoretical discourse. This global marriage produces intimacy and sensitivity about architecture's interaction with culture and human bodies, but it also revels in the messy and the gigantic. LA seems like the right place for them to land. MoMA, the Architectural League, Venice Biennale, Graham Foundation, Coachella, there are so many exhibitions, honors, teaching gigs, and publications that have blossomed during their first decade that it already seems like a lifetime of work. But I am quite confident that they are just getting warmed up. Here to give us a tour through their architectural wilds and maybe a conversation are Jimenez and Joanna Grant.
Thank you, Hadrian. Yeah, is this thing on? Can you guys hear us? Joanna, how are you doing?
Seems good.
Okay.
Can everyone hear me?
Good? Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for this incredible introduction of us. I think, for me to be here and understanding the legacy of the school is such an honor for I don't know, I believe
both of us.
I speak for both of us. That this is just incredible.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, Gary, and thank you for the wonderful introduction, Hadrian. It's really an honor to speak here at USC.
So the format of our presentation today is going to be sort of a conversation, I guess. Obviously everything's scripted. But we're going to, but then there are going to be times that we go off script, and maybe in doing so, we might discover something ourselves. So, okay.
So we've kind of structured this into several conversation topics. Professional practice, history and theory, color and materiality, structures and organization, friends and influences, and doing something good. And these are kind of the themes and conversations that are latent within our office, and so we're going to try to publicly emulate them.
Yeah, maybe work through some stuff.
So let's start with professional practice. Jimenez, in the beginning, you started Bureau Spectacular by drawing comics. And as we all know, architecture is something which takes a lot of time, especially starting an office and building a client base. Can you identify and articulate on some of the early stages of Bureau Spectacular?
Sure. So the early stages, I guess this was the beginning, this room, in some ways a beginning. The whole thing started in 2008, the idea of Bureau Spectacular, the worst time you can start anything. So I think the fact that we didn't really have very many clients at the beginning was not by choice, it was by circumstance. And so 2008, I was lucky to have been teaching in Chicago. This was back at UIC, University of Illinois at Chicago, when I was invited by director Bob Somel to teach there. And I happened upon this warehouse, which was going, like 80 cents a square foot, which was incredible to rent. So I rented it and decided to build a house inside of the warehouse. And so this was the briefcase house, I guess a super kind of super furniture, a thing that's too small to be architecture but too big to be furniture. And so the space around it, I don't know if there's a pointer or anything, but so those desks, some of them are still with us. Those desks, that was the beginning, that was the beginning of Bureau Spectacular. And I was indeed, drawing a lot of comics. This was a year ago. We just moved out of downtown LA. We have a new location now. It's nearby USC, so it's walking distance for Joanna. But, I was drawing a lot of comics at the beginning because I think, there's a strong relationship. Right now we're putting together a permit set, which is super difficult, I think. But a permit set, in some ways, let's just say the combination of text and image as a communication device, which architecture is. And the permit set, for all intents and purposes, it's a legal document comprised of text and images. And so as a younger person, when I was, in elementary school, I always was reading comics. And I felt that the line work composition that, allowed people to talk about, I guess, communicate time, space, scale, repetition, language. These were all ways of thinking about, architecture in a lot of ways. And the translation of, I guess, world building within the storytelling realm of comics allowed some of the installations to be avenues of testing out some of these ideas. So for instance, in one of the story arcs of the comic book, I was working on some spaceships. And if I took that seriously, and to imagine life without gravity, it also means that orthographic projection is exactly just that, an orientationless, distinctionless, sets of drawings where plans, sections, and reflected ceiling plans are all floating in space. And so this installation, which was built here in Los Angeles at Materials and Applications, was a way of testing the idea by containing 4 drawings into a cylinder and allowing it to rotate at once an hour, remove let's say the weight of the assignment of drawing types. A plan would become a section every 15 minutes and so on and so forth. So, early on, let's say the export of architectural ideas out of comic books, often took form of installations. So, and a lot of times it was dealing with rotations. So if the previous architectural drawing rotation, which relied on axis, is a cylinder, there are other rotations, including spheres. So this piece, White Elephant, was an idea about tumbling a mass that is not, I guess, created a bunch of new proportions. Did you want me to stop?
Oh, I was already going to go off script, actually. I was going to ask, hypothetically, because I know, all of the installations correspond to a story, right?
A lot of them, yeah. Not all of them.
But all of the early installations corresponded to a story. So there's a relationship with narrative and the artifact.
I have no idea what she's going to ask me.
It was actually more of a comment. We can keep moving on.
Should we just move on? Yeah, so no, the idea of the early career, maybe knowingly or unknowingly, Toyo Ito's early career was always sort of on the back of every conversation. Toyo Ito when he started his career, where he started this project called Urban Robots, which was the name of the practice, his first practice, Urban Robots. Besides the U-House, I guess the primary focus was not about building buildings for Ito. The primary focus was about research and experimentation. And so this was done through teaching, writing, publishing, exhibiting. And I thought this was fantastic. You know, he had time to work on becoming a better thinker and the kinds of time and space that maybe the financial crisis afforded us.
But Toyo Ito eventually changed the name of his office from Urban Robots to Toyo Ito and Associates, right? Would you ever consider changing the name of the office? And what would you change it to?
No. Bureau Sober. So we can stop having intoxicating things.
So there's a certain point in the office when the relationship between the installations and the comics seems to become even more related. So in what stage would you say our office is in right now?
I would loosely summarize the existence of Bureau Spectacular into 3 stages. Stage 1 would be this: cartoons about architecture, where cartoon is the medium, architecture is the subject matter. Stage 2 would be cartoonish architecture, and this is, I think, when we started working together. So cartoonish architecture, where architecture is the medium and cartoon is the sensibility. So, you know, it would be, I guess, the sensibility of cartoonishness would be explored either in plan or in section. And the third stage, which is where we are right now, I would say cartoons on architecture. If we think about, you know, everyday life as dramatic as scripts and, you know, as dramatic as storyboards, and architecture is the backdrop upon which the stories occur, maybe as we hopefully begin to build more, we would be considering cartoons on architecture. And I think, you know, once we start thinking about that, you know, I begin to see cartoons on architecture everywhere. If, you know, these 2 super iconic Florentine doors, inscribed upon them are super nice cartoonish bubbles with, you know, biblical life that happens on them. Sometimes the bubbles contain literal stories, and other times maybe the bubbles are just abstract bubbles.
So what's it like working with another person versus working by yourself?
This is Joanna. Joanna's great. No, I think we both. So I think this is a really good representation of, let's say, an office portrait of what happens in the office. So we developed these 2 projects independently, and we named them independently. We weren't really talking to each other at the time, and, you know, professionally. And, you know, so this one, the blue one is called Scribble. It's hard, brittle,
kind of
blue, lights up at night, which I guess that's me. And the other one is rosy, friendly, and awkward. You know, like I think this is a perfect description or portrait of us, and I think, you know, we may or may not agree on things, and I find that to be super healthy and productive, because when I come to dislike the idea that, you know, projects can be done through the quote-unquote stroke of genius of sorts. And I think conversations are fantastic. Conversations are what makes decisions well considered.
That's the theme of our lecture title?
It says, and seen. So we're going to move on to the second topic, which is history and theory. I want to ask Joanna a question, which is the titular question. Is it a conversation? Often when we talk in the office, you know, our conversations are deeply rooted in our shared interest in history and theory. And you were educated by, you know, Sylvia Lavin, John Louis Cohen, Beatrice Colomina, Bob Somel, Jeff Kipnis, just to name a few. Has these types of influences impacted the way you approach projects?
I think we use history in the office in a really specific way. History is always somehow present in any project that we tend to do. But I want to be really specific about the way that we talk about history versus theory. Because all of the names that you just named, except for one, I would say that they're theorists. They're not historians. And to kind of make a definition of each, historians merely collect information and document history. It's very much a production of fact. And the way that theory is kind of working is always looking at history in conversation or as a juxtaposition to how it relates to today. So essentially, history can be recast by certain members of the aforementioned names and kind of talked about in a very specific way. Like, I think the way that we engage with, we're always thinking about Le Corbusier or Los or and kind of engaging with them in particular ways. But I think like to talk about one of our projects most recently at the model that we produced for the Chicago Architecture Biennial, the theme of the biennial was make new history. So our prompt was to select a canonical interior photograph and produce a model based off of that photograph. So we were thinking of Los in selecting this model, but more importantly, I think Beatriz Colomina and her writing of Los and her rereading of Los in Sexuality and Space. So this is the interior photograph, and the way that she was casting it was talking about the male-dominant living spaces and the ROM plan. And we all know the ROM plan. So the relationship between particular staging, voyeurism in section. From this image, you can see through all of the 4 parts of the house. So in reconstructing this image, we took the single point perspective, reconstructed it, and then produced this diagram. So this is the figure ground drawing of the images that we were looking at as they related to the exterior of Los. So we deconstructed this and placed all of the voyeur in the living room to the left, and the 4 different characters that were being framed and staged to the right. So this is the model. And the way that it worked, we found it to be really important to demonstrate the model as a kind of device of power and who controls the power. So we had wired a few buttons, 4 of them didn't work, and 1 of them actually controlled the views because this is a one-way mirror, so you can only see it when it's illuminated from behind. So in looking at the relationship between history and the kind of artifact that we were producing, this is actually a story that you wrote in 2011. So we were thinking also of our own history. Do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So this is a story about. So the title of the story is Sociopaths. It's a story about a murder with 3 witnesses, all suspects. And this particular chapter of that murder, all 3 witnesses confessed to the same murder, which is impossible. And meaning either 2 of them were lying, or maybe all 3 of them were lying, or maybe the unreliable narrator would remember such accounts on their own accord, and maybe their injured relationship with the victim helped them remember an incorrect house altogether. And so the 3 accounts became 3 houses. The house of the wife, she describes a story about jealousy, lust, an affair, and and it led to an altercation between 2 men, and eventually, a murder took place, and she confessed to it. But she described the house as a house of, the house as a machine for voyeurism. And the very jealous husband was there to always watch her, and the house was designed in a way where she can be watched.
So additionally, we were thinking about Los's principles of cladding, which also harkens back to one of the White Elephant projects.
Yes, which was written in 1898. Okay, sorry, go on.
Wrong publication. And we were thinking, Los wrote in the principles of cladding that Architecture is the first detail. You have this.
Yeah. So the carpet where the animal hide is the first architectural is a livable material, and the act of covering oneself, the act of cladding oneself with this livable material is the first architectural detail. And so
architecture is basically the framework through which we hang skin. So obviously we're thinking of Lena Los's bedroom, and I think a lesser known image in Los's history, but very much canonical and very unusual, as showing a continuous surface of the furs on the floor. But yet the architecture kind of falls to the background. The exterior of Los's buildings were perhaps less considered. We chose this image as showing the kind of 5 o'clock shadow that we were interested in producing in our model. So we clad the exterior as another articulation of the interior with fur. So this is a few images of it. Okay, so let's talk about materiality. Since moving to Los Angeles, you've developed a distinct interest in white. So I recognize the fact that some people may be misled to believe that you mean a color. So could you clarify this?
Sure. So this is very indicative of work that we did prior to moving to Los Angeles. Like anybody else, we love rainbows and unicorns and flying cats and so forth. And so color was really important to us. But then this happened to me when I moved to Los Angeles in 2014. This was one of the first things that I encountered when I came here, which is the Bates Hotel from Vincent Lamarot. So something about this project spoke to me, and the message was, steel is white, stucco is white, concrete is white, wood is white. Not only that, nature, even the trees are white. Nature is white. And I started thinking a bit deeper about everyone that I care about, or admire, or think about, and everyone who's been through Los Angeles or are in Los Angeles. And it is shocking that, almost without fail, everyone has some kind of a moment or an entire project that has something to do with white. Even in the less likely cases, or in the least likely cases, something happens. And I kept thinking, all right, let's take a step back and consider the etymology of the word white and maybe its tangential relationships with other associated meanings. Can white be talking about nothing, or neutral, or natural, or silence, or maybe even nakedness, or authenticity, perhaps, or kind of modesty? And I started thinking about such expressions of related thoughts in other cultures. Maybe in places like Japan, it has to be either wood or residues of wood, or in places like Northern Europe, honesty or modesty or nothingness can only be articulated through brick. Even when the materiality itself transcends outside of being brick, it still has to be taking the expression of brick. So coming back to Los Angeles, this is one of my favorite images to be thinking about when I think about Los Angeles. As you might recognize, this is the LA River and the LA River bank of LA River. The bank of LA River, once upon a time, was a favorite playground for graffiti artists to tag. To tag is a political act. To tag is to declare, I am here, and therefore, let's say a drawing of a political boundary has begun. So for gang members of sorts, maybe they unknowingly are participating in this, tens of thousands of years of tradition of rock art, because our ancient ancestors also produced rock art to declare territory. So the political entity that is Los Angeles swooped down from their political position and performed this act of mass censorship by painting everything the emblematic tag of their political identity, which is white. White, in this case, even speaks to me about the position of Los Angeles as a city, because the city of Los Angeles is now loudly declaring that white is as good as concrete. In other words, once I began to put this whole thing together, I realized something about what white is to Los Angeles. White in Los Angeles is not a color, it is a material. And so, sorry.
There's also another history of, sorry, do you?
What? Another history?
There's another history of the office that deals with unfinished materials, right?
Yeah. So, so the Tower of Twelve Stories. This is the Coachella project that we did in 2016. This project is white, but it wasn't always white. When this project came out, I had to talk to some, let's say, like members of the press at the time, and they would ask questions like, "What's this project made of?" So my earnest answer would be steel and lumber, but I wanted to give them the snarky answer, which is white. This project is made of white. This was one of the last site visits before the project was finished, and I was so taken by the scene because I think let's say the undercoat of the actual materiality to me was so beautiful. I was asking myself, why don't we just leave it this way? But we couldn't, because there was something that was unstoppable and about the calling of Los Angeles and its a contextual understanding of this materiality that I couldn't resist. Because Joanna, you're right. Like, the briefcase house was not white. It was a different type of expression of nothingness, meaning the materiality is exposed. But then when the same concept and the same diagram was brought to Los Angeles, this is the Frankie store that we designed in 2016. Somehow it did have to become white for some reason or another. But I want to bounce the question back to you because, Joanna, you have a very specific relationship with color. And also a lot of the projects that we worked on, especially this project, the Township of Domestic Parts project for the Taiwan Pavilion, you played a major role in the decision-making of the colors. Can you say something about your relationship with color?
Yeah, I mean, I think that many of us had the experience of entering architecture school, and our professors told us that the only acceptable color to use as an architect is red. But I really like pink, so I kind of had to reconcile this fact. So this was a project that we did in 2013, but it's a way that I've been continuing to think about our relationship with color, which I'll continue to talk about later. But I want to revisit history, of course, to kind of talk about history of color and how it's kind of influencing our work and our project. So these two images are the same image. And I happened to find the original on the left is Alex Wall's The Pleasure of Architecture from 1982. And the one on the right actually resurfaced on the internet around 2012. It was posted by Andrew Kovacs on his blog Archive of Affinities. And it's like a B-side edition of...
I think people know Andrew, no? Okay, sorry.
Yes, I'm sure they do. It's a B-side edition of The Pleasure of Architecture, but the origin was unknown. I eventually found that it was reproduced for a publication that was a predominantly black and white publication in 1983, which the dates are significant because of the fact that this was a competition for Parc de la Villette, and we all know who won, right? Bernard Chumie won. But this drawing was published after the fact, and I thought it was very interesting that it was red, black, and white, and the other one is kind of a pastel pop rendition. So I was thinking about the history of red in architecture as a color, why red, and it kind of brought me back to L. Lisitsky's Beat the Whites with the Red Wedge, in which the way that I'm reading this project is a Gestalt reading, figure ground reading either or, but then red represents something else, and that something else is information, which as we move through history, Eisenman's indexical drawings of process in House 6, I never actually looked at the photographs of the interior until about a year or two ago when I realized that the stairs are literally the diagram. The house is very much embodying the diagram. So not only, like, we all know the drawing first, but we pay less attention to the photographs. So the actual relationship with materiality is that color becomes the materiality. And this also is evident in Shumi's work. We all know Parc de la Villette, and the Manhattan transcripts, which was published about a year or two before Parc de la Villette. And he's thinking of architecture as event and indexing that event through the application of red. So that becomes manifested in a built form in Parc de la Villette. The reason that I'm showing the drawings and the buildings is to kind of show the relationship between the indexicality of the color as a paint color. It's not standing in as a material, it's not standing in as brick. We're not supposed to read Parc de la Villette as steel, but we're supposed to read it as red. And I think this is particularly interesting in some of his later work where on the left, he's drawing the event and narrative space, the architecture, as being red, but then it can be interchanged by any color. The autonomy of the drawing is very much represented through his rendition of red versus blue or yellow. It doesn't matter what it becomes, it can be anything, but the drawing or the architecture has to be red. So in thinking about the slide that Jimenez showed just a few minutes ago, this project is our showroom for Frankie. It's in the Arts District, and it's white. But I think with our work, there's a distinct, we're always talking about how to represent our work and what the actual site of the work is. And the site is usually the internet. The representational image somehow is foregrounded to the actual work, and the means for proliferation can be something other than what it is. So we shot this project with lighting that started to represent color or projection a year and a half ago. And then we did a project with Red Cat for the Red Cat Gala, in which these are actually materially white, but light is able to start to become materiality through the means of representation.
Mm. And for Shumi, red is not a color.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So white is not a color?
No.
Okay, so the Tower of 12 Stories project, it was a bit of a structural feat, no? I have a not-so-secret obsession with eccentric columns, which this project has many of them. There's actually no columns that are perpendicular to the ground. So could you explain how this works structurally and how it relates to your interest in posture and contrapposto?
It's really cool because I spot a bunch of my UCLA students who are in this class right now, which is Structures and Organization. Hey guys. So the Tower of 12 Stories, as you mentioned, has columns, and 0 out of the 12 columns are perpendicular to the ground. I just want to emphasize how stupid that is. Thankfully we had structural engineers who took it on as a challenge, less so as a... But I want to show a little bit of the background of this train of thought a bit. So in the story Primitives, which is in Citizens of No Place, I guess I was thinking a lot about the relationship between posture and skylines. And let's just say that okay, well, first of all, why would anyone care whether or not a building has a personality? Or isn't it too literal to think about a building having a posture? Yes, true. But the idea of studying the human body or the human body language of the human, let's say youth, is something that exists in the discipline of the history of art for a few hundred, if not 1,000 years, a couple thousand years. So to your left, you have the Greek kouros, which is exhibiting a kind of bilateral symmetry. To the center, there's Michelangelo's David, which is performing contrapposto, and to your right. Wait, is that your right? Yeah, to your right, there's Bernini's David, which is in mid-motion torque. So even if I cover their faces, the body language is speaking to us, where you have a stiff individual, a relaxed individual, and an intense individual. The body language sort of speaks their intent. So if we think about whether or not architecture has a direct translation to the tripartite relationship of something like a human body or a column, even the column in its own, the components of the column, even its own etymology, we understand that it's translated from the human body, base, shaft, and capital. And Adolf Loos, I guess, at this point in time, did take Sullivan's statements quite literally, the tripartite stack being, a podium, typical plans, and the crown as sort of a human body of sorts. So I often wonder whether or not I have a particular soft spot for the Seattle Public Library, the massing of Seattle Public Library, not because of its particular angles of sorts, but maybe it is a tripartite stack performing contrapposto. Maybe it is a relaxed personality. And so this idea of, so just to emphasize the point, I guess, why would anyone care? I think this is partially why. It is within reasons for us to consider that most cities are so proud of their an abstraction, a two-dimensional abstraction of their skyline that they would be able to use it as a source of identity and print it either on their T-shirts or on their mugs. And if we consider every skyline to be a sentence, and every work of architecture being the characters that help spell out that sentence, it is possible that it's not so much what the cities are saying, but how the cities are saying it. And each and every individual, let's say, personality or character help contribute towards that source of identity. This is why I think it really matters to consider architecture to be characters. So for the White Elephant Project, we were thinking about architecture having some kind of proportional personality or proportional posture. So when it came down to the Tower of 12 Stories, I really thought, okay, here we have the opportunity to test something out, and really wanted some kind of contrapposto to exist. So the lumpy, slumpy, relaxed, confident personality. I wanted the hip line and the shoulder line to be non-parallel with the ground somehow. And this had to be achieved. And so by the time we got to the 12 non-vertical columns, we stopped talking about them as columns. We started talking about them as 4 tripods. And the 4 tripods actually became super strong when you put the 4 tripods together, as though we can think of the steel endoskeleton as hip bones, and the 4 merged hip bones actually formed one really strong character. The other structural stupidity that we committed was considering tangent points on a curve to be acting in compression. That's really, really dumb, guys. Don't do it. But if you do it on top of the curve, I think it works as an arch. But on the bottom, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But we also resolved that by developing a detail that's a lot like a point weld of sorts that helped the points to be quite sturdy. But I want to show this image because both in terms of structure and organization, something happened here. Something happened as we were discovering a little bit more about ourselves, which is this is a ill-fitting structural system.
Oh, I think I'm supposed to ask you a question.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got too into it.
So another project in our office that we're working on is fitness. If I was funny, I would try to make a joke about the gym or cardio or weightlifting. I'm so not funny that I have to stop you so that I can not make a joke. But fitness or fit in the organizational sense, how are you defining these categories? In many of our conversations, we talk about the mathematical set as a possible organization and structural strategy. What are some of the projects in the past few years that have worked towards this study?
Right, so I want to describe 3 kinds of fitness that's starting to recur within our work. So this is an ill-fitting situation. You guys might recognize her. This is Mayan. She was teaching here, no? Okay, so this is an ill-fitting situation where the bubbles have such bad connection systems that the ghastly gaping holes are just there, and you can see how there's in such ill-fitting conditions. But ill-fitting isn't always what we do, because sometimes we do the perfect fit or well-fitting. So maybe that would be a second way of thinking about fitness as a perfect jigsaw puzzle that comes back together into, let's say, a complete whole. And so for the storefront for art and architecture, 99 Chairs bench project, we did that, exactly that, which is a rainbow through some clouds that exploded, but they come back together as a well-fitting situation rather than an ill-fitting situation.
One thing that we've discovered, things that fit well together do not actually fit well together.
Well, things that fit well together, you guys, if you're doing that, you need to leave a little gap. Otherwise, they fit too well together and they don't come apart. But there's a third condition, I think, in terms of structures and organization beyond ill-fitting and well-fitting, which is loose-fitting. When we're doing this project for the Shenzhen 2015 by City Biennial, the curator, Aaron Betsky, asked us to do two things. One, can you do a 3D collage? Two, can you be contextual to the fact that this is in Shenzhen? So what we did was we decided to go on a shopping spree and look for objects that were either made in China or had gone through the port in Shenzhen. And so we looked for objects that are, from dollar stores, and we decided to pick the objects up and ask them a very critical question, which is, dear object, are you homesick? Let's take you home for a class reunion. So this was a mailing project. We mailed these toys back to Shenzhen and then mailed them back again to Los Angeles. And so this was a kind of back and forth system. So, obviously, as you can tell, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to point out the placement of that column.
Right, I mean, it's a quote.
Looks
we're
illogical.
quoting the project.
Probably shouldn't put it there.
Okay. Like Stanley Kubrick can afford really expensive French furniture, but we can use the dollar store, I guess. No, but the loose-fitting situation is the third kind. If we had ill-fitting that created actually really interesting gaps, which could be considered windows possibly, or the well-fitting, which is a kind of compartment system. Maybe the loose-fitting is a way of thinking about an interior urbanism. So even for the Taiwan Pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2014, I would say the architectural plan was a loose-fitting situation. If I'm a fan of comic books, which I am, if I think of the speech bubbles where the frames to be, let's say, designations of specificity, then the architectural program in the plan is that. These are the bubbles, with speech bubbles, and the gutters between the bubbles would be what could be considered corridors or programless spaces. And perhaps the architectural boundary would be the page in itself. And so once I start thinking of architectural plans that way, I also can't unsee it. And now when I look for plans, I look for these kinds of loose-fitting scenarios. And maybe when I look a little further back in more recent history of architecture, I do find these kinds of loose-fitting organizations super pleasurable. And this is the mathematical set that Joanna was talking about. It's all I ever think about.
You say that about everything.
That's not true. Right, so these kinds of Venn diagrams, have so many formal implications, in my opinion. So the triple extrusion diagrams that we're doing, a kind of Boolean, system that we're working with. Do you like it?
He keeps talking about it. Okay. So should we?
I think we're running out of time. We're just going to fly right through these slides because they're really, I don't know, are they?
I guess I'll ask the question. Maybe I can ask the question and it can go unanswered.
Sure, yeah.
The subtitle of the project treatise was under the statement, "Why Write Alone? Questioning the autonomy of the act of writing and presenting a questioning of authorship." I would ask you to elaborate on this thought.
The treatise project, I think, I really want to thank Sarah Herta. If you guys don't know Sarah Herta, she runs the Graham Foundation. If you're looking for a life of research and experimentation, the Graham Foundation is here to support you. You should apply for grants, and she'll give you money to work on your projects. And so really, I guess at the time I was thinking about three related projects that motivated the treatise project. One of which was obviously the Charlottesville tapes, where I guess 20 or 30 individuals were locked up in a room to yell at each other. Here you can see Leon Creer ironically clapping 20 sometimes. But I think that the project, like I said, I don't know, this is really important. The other thing that we were responding to at the time was pamphlet architecture, obviously. I think, if I think about the contemporary publication culture that we're in right now, it's really a culture of mixtapes or compilations, no longer albums. And so I thought it would be really great to work on a project where I'm encouraging friends and colleagues to produce a few albums. Many of them are here with us. So for instance, well, actually nobody's here in the room. I thought Alex Myman, I thought he was going to be here, but that's okay, I guess. But I guess in sort of acting as an editor of sorts, I came to understand my friends a lot better, or maybe came to understand why I'm attracted to them in the first place. Maybe there is a kind of immediate reincarnation of similar thoughts being translated in a different way. Andrew and Anna used to be here, right? So I don't know. Maybe we can just flip through. Yeah, but I think influences of friends and colleagues. I really think without possible mediums, the treatise project also wouldn't happen. It's really important to recognize such a fantastic moment at the Knowlton Hall at Columbus, Ohio, where they got together all these people to attempt at a cross-pollination project. But I think influences of friends, we're friends and influences. You've made some new friends.
Yeah, everything is terrible as a new friend. So we've actually been fans of, we're fans of many YouTubers, which we're also interested in movies, and we actually serendipitously met them about a year ago when we rented a shop space in Vernon. They had their entire studio and stage there. And what they do is they kind of compile and edit VHS tapes, and they put them onto the internet. But a side project of theirs has been to collect every single Jerry Maguire VHS tape in the world.
Every Jerry Maguire in the world.
This has been something that they've been working on for 8 years.
Yeah.
And people just send them to them. So this is their collection of Jerry Maguire tapes. And so
they measure by weight at this point.
Yes, by tons, actually, I think is their metric. So they approached us and asked us to design them a pyramid in the desert in Joshua Tree, because they needed an architect. So we produced a few images for them of what our
eventually they went
were.
with a Nevada-based architect.
Yeah, it's fine. So we produced these images for them, and I designed a nice throne.
Yeah, Joanna bitmapped every Jerry Maguire.
Every Jerry Maguire. I can tell you the number of VHS tapes that you need for a stair, which is very useful information in life. So we've also Theo, who is trained as an architect and teaches at UCLA in the media arts program.
Some Greek people. So for instance, Andreas Angelodakis as well. I think if we're talking about is it a conversation, we think about our friends all the time, and some of them are just really, as you can see, really weird, and but it really changes our views on things. And so, for us, this is a series of renders that we produced for the SF MoMA project. For us, maybe it's okay to like high culture and pop culture at the same time. I feel like there was a point in time where I felt like it was important to choose whether it is important to only invest in one of the areas. But I don't think so. I think maybe sometimes the entirety of the influences are considered quote unquote high culture, but there are times that I can conflate Kung Fury with Andreas Gursky, and I think that's totally Okay, maybe. Maybe not.
I hope so.
Hopefully.
It's probably fine.
Hopefully okay. Okay, so this is the last portion. Sorry to have kept you so long. We're gonna run through this portion also relatively quickly, but I want to start this portion by asking Joanna a question, and I'm going to frame the question a little bit with one of my favorite things to think about, which is the Ship of Theseus. So the Ship of Theseus is I don't know, Jeff, you know the Ship of Theseus. Most philosophy students really get into it. So the Ship of Theseus is a story about a ship, and the ship once upon a time, departs from a port of origin, and it's made of, let's say, wood. And on the ship, there's a crew with a captain. As this ship hits, some rock, and let's say 5% of the wood chips off, and they have to dock and get some new wood, replace it. In the process, some sailor either die or fall in love with somebody and leaves the crew. They have to replace this crew with somebody. Meaning, over time, the hardware, the 100% hardware of the materiality begins to chip away, as well as the software, meaning the crew members begin to chip away. So this ship goes on a super long journey, and by the time it's back to its port of origin, has undergone a, let's say, metabolism where 100% of its materiality has been replaced, and 100% of its crew members, including the captain, were replaced. Yet it calls itself Theseus. And so I find that super interesting when we think about preservation, especially, when we think about, whenever I think about the Parthenon, it's always under construction perpetually. And, if I were to pick up a piece of rock, who's to say how original that is, or is it original? And so I want to, use this to frame a question about your thesis project, which has everything to do with preservation, originality, or original ideas.
I think in thinking about the original and the copy, I would say the Ship of Theseus becomes a representational image of the original. So I was looking at, for my thesis project, I was looking at a notion of preservation, which I'll elaborate on in a little bit. And I was looking at 3 buildings in particular. This one is the Orange County Government Center by Paul Rudolph. And it's actually in a state of being remodeled, which the design is slightly different than the original. But this is the state when they've actually halfway demolished it and are going to replace it with something different. This is Michael Grazes' Portland building, a building which most citizens of Portland either loathe or love. I think maybe recently they like it a lot more. And the Kishikurokawa Nakagen Capsule Tower, which I think is just in a serious state of disrepair. So these buildings are part of our canon. We all know them. We've all seen them before. We all love them because of the fact that they represent particular moments in architectural history. But generally, some members of the public might not see them quite so favorably. And buildings are actually not designed to last forever. The materials that we use these days tends to decay after 30 to 50 years. So it's kind of a difficult question. Whenever a public doesn't necessarily like a building, how do you kind of approach its preservation? So simultaneously, I was always very interested in cute kittens and unicorns and rainbows, and kind of to follow up the conversation with consumer art or low art. Kawaii has always kind of fascinated me. So in embarking upon this research project and design project, I was looking at what makes something cute and why do people love cute things so much. And actually there's a lot of research done in psychology, and Konrad Lorenz found that basically it's all about proportions and something called the caretaker effect. Baby animals and baby humans have specific facial and body proportions, larger heads proportionally to their bodies, larger eyes, that makes us want to take care of them. And that's kind of manipulative, actually. So,
But I think, the idea that form follows empathy.
right,
Right?
exactly. So we've done this to dogs. Obviously, over the course of a couple of thousands of years, we've been able to transform them into something very adorable. We do this with Hello Kitty. And I found this to be really interesting because of the fact that, it's okay for hair dryers to be cute, but for toilet seats, maybe it's getting a little awkward, or a cute chainsaw. The meaning of the image as it's juxtaposed on the function of the object becomes so divorced that we get the sushi eraser. And for me, this is the kind of the epitome of cuteness. The representational image, we're reading sushi, but we're not eating sushi. And it's so cute that we don't even want to use it as an eraser, so it's kind of pointless in every sense.
Yeah, it fails at every function.
It fails at everything. Yeah. So I guess in this sense, I was thinking about when you juxtapose, this is something called the Kuleshov Effect, where when you juxtapose two different images, our minds kind of read them together. So hunger, sadness, lust. So these are nothing really happened here other than they're a different color. But I started making these stickers that not only is it making the building look more cute, but also when you're doing it, you're kind of being cute. So these are some of the compositions of just building parts. What does cute buildings look like? But I kind of discovered that it's really more about the process of empathizing with something that really produces the affection that one needs to presumably preserve things. So I made a game because the stickers weren't really interactive enough. I was thinking maybe you need to clean buildings. So this game, which I don't know if it's going to play.
Yeah, it's going to play. Yeah, it's going to be a problem if we can't.
There we go. Okay. So you can still put the stickers on the game, so you can actively become the designer. You can redesign your own Kisho Kurokawa. Everyone needs an Alexander Calder monument. But over time, the buildings start to become dirty and you have to clean them, and then the stickers start to fall off. So it's kind of to underscore the relationship between the image, not only the image of the building, but generating the empathy in the user so that they're kind of taking care of the building, but then finding it to be cute. So the relationship between these images it's obviously not supposed to be the Nakagan capsule tower, but it's supposed to engender a kind of fondness or likening to potentially preserving the original.
So, So speaking of the original materiality, so when Coachella Music Festival came down and finished, we, thanks to our friends at This by That, which, they helped us preserve about 30% of the 100% of the original materiality. The other 70 were just destroyed, right? And there I was thinking, man, I'm these endangered species in the Amazon, having had their let's say natural habitat chopped down to be exported as lumber from Brazil to California, only to have lived a short and pointless life. Is that it? Do we close USC? I think we closed USC. So, getting stuff destroyed, throwing away all this wood just made me feel so guilty about the consumption of material and let's say, the tyranny of temporary architecture. What do you do with it when you do some kind of let's say, interesting installation that's intellectual and at the same time harming the environment so badly? I don't know, and I felt so bad about this whole thing that I even became vegan briefly.
That's not why you went vegan. That's not why you went vegan.
So, the doing temporary architecture, and I did become vegan briefly. But so Joanna put this together, after we did the Red Cat installation, I don't know, I thought it was really funny.
We're not getting any laughs, but okay.
No, but even at, what is it, $150? It couldn't sell.
Gently used podiums or art installation. $150.
Yeah, we couldn't even sell it. So when we were approached by, I guess when we became the finalists for the MoMA PS1 Courtyard competition in 2016, this was question number one: what do we do with it afterwards? Are we going to throw it away again if we win? And so we began to consider the possibility that Marcel Duchamp is the original sustainable artist, where he really fully embodied reuse, reduce, recycle. And and we even really thought about the quality of curve that this fountain had. The quality of curve of this outline is impeccable, in my opinion. And so if we were to want to build some cartoonish curves, what if we don't
build them ourselves?
What if we find them? What if there are these industry standard, in nice shapes that we would have wanted to build, and if there are these decommissioned fiberglass pools that we can get some companies to, in kind donate to us, we can compose it in a way where it helps us talk to architects that we love. It helps us maybe realize diagrams that we think should be realized. So maybe we'll play this video. It's about 6 minutes, and we'll just open up the conversation to the audience members. Wait, where's the video? Oh yeah, here's me trying to, I presented this slide to the board members of MoMA, trying to convince them that you don't even have to be human to appreciate being in a pool together. Okay, will it play?
I guess I have to click the button.
Well.
Summertime is a time of leisure. It is a time when we remember to forget, at least for 1 or 2 weekends, there should not be a single worry in the world. Any hard-working person should take some time off, partake in some casual day drinking, half listen to some outdoor concerts, and forget your worldly sadness. Welcome to Pool Party, where no athletic abilities are required, and our only desire is a safe haven for a poolside lazy summer afternoon. Pool Party is an archipelago of half-forgotten breakfast like the clouds that fly over our heads whilst we all dance together in and around the shape of the shadows they cast. Strap on, relax, and enjoy the Pool Party. Pool Party is virtually indestructible. Engineer Matthew Melnick from NAS Engineering helped us develop a structural system where we can create a lightweight framework safe for 5,000 drunk people. Pool Party creates a pleasant climatic environment with a network of cooling factors, including shade, shadows that stencils the sun, as well as design evaporative systems. Pool Party creates a striking visual environment where visitors can dance under a sky of upside-down bellies of pools. Pool Party will be relatively easy to build. There are only very few basic material components to manage: tools, water collection system, structural framework, and on-the-ground furniture pieces. First, there are 9 pools. We consider each pool to be characters with personalities. We have always liked pools at Bureau Spectacular. Our Coachella project tower of 12 stories was a collection of pools stacked vertically. But what if we won't have to spend extra material or waste more energy to construct the pools, but follow the tradition of Marcel Duchamp and find a flying fleet of oversized fountains? What if we can find some off-market, already defective pools that companies would have disposed but gather them together into a team of misfit heroes in an epic rescue mission? For instance, Dune Tub, Lil Bob, Lazy L, True L, or the Ottawa are all industry standard pools we already identified. No new energy will be required to construct the pools, and no pools will go into the dumpsters afterwards. We have had our share of heartbreaks with throwing away art projects we love. The next component is the water collection system. We will acquire a small amount of irrigation pipes and connect it into a network that pools, drains, and nozzles out water. We have been calculating the correct sun angle between 12 to 4 p.m. in this geographic region of the world and hope to spray rainbows against our pools. The third important component is the structural grid. Our initial question was, what if there is a construction happening in or around New York, say October 2017? Our idea is the schedule to install in a synchronized motion with a project partner so that another group of people can reuse our structure almost immediately after. The last component is the collection of furniture-like objects on the ground. There will be a shadowed pool-like object trained daily where people can sit around and chit-chat. This is a story about reuse, reduce and recycle. We want to construct a system where a reduced amount of energy will be required to build the shapes we would have wanted to build anyway, and no amount of curated material will go to waste. This is also a story about the culture in or around pools. A drought in the 20th century became the very foundation of skateboarding as a sport in California when a creative use the dry pool took place in Dogtown. One could perhaps argue that this event became the first human physical interaction with an elliptic paraboloid. In a non-athletic sense, the culture of the pool is also a romantic space for the puppy love rescue scene in The Sandlot, the jealous passive-aggressive horse plays in Mrs. Doubtfire, the outlandish extravaganzas in The Anchorman, the sense of infinite sadness in Less Than Zero, the full-blown eroticism in Wild Things, Shagirl, or Alpha Dog, or the flirtatious cocktail winks in any Bond movies. The blue glowing pool has been a prime setting for iconic moments of fantasy space, getting in trouble, falling in love, or coming of age. Visitors do not need to know or care about our love for Cedric Price, Kishore Kurokawa, John Haler, or Yona Friedman. The party casting a group of shadows that shield tired and overworked people from the hot summer sun. Sitting on a 60 by 60 feet burning box and peaking at 30 feet in height, pool party is a very feasible canopy system visible far away from PS1. For 18 years, the Young Architects program at MoMA PS1 has continuously been one of the most important platforms for architectural experimentation, similar to the examination of an ice core sample. PS1 is a marker of air quality for every annual increment over the last 2 decades. Every single submission of the competition, built or unbuilt, is an evidence that documents the spirit of the times for every season. For that, we want to begin by saying, thank you, MoMA PS1, for offering all of us a reason to reach higher.
Great. Thank you very much. Would you like to have a conversation?
What comics are you thinking about lately?
I'm still thinking about Vagabond.
I don't read comment.
Sure.
Should we pass?
Yeah,
on?
I don't know. Yeah.
I guess we have to turn these on.
That one went pretty fast. There's some animations. Like, I don't remember. It was a while ago though. This is like the middle. They look pretty good.
Just say when.
I mean this? No.
Did you turn on? Hello?
Oh, there it goes. So Kolomina, in discussing Lowe's, suggests that there's this idea of the clothing and the way that sort of in polite sort of like Western society one effaces oneself in sort of like black and white, and in the sort of like sort of more primitive societies, people wear clothes, and so he sort of has this idea of putting that on the interior of his buildings. And in your project, you seem to sort of take that sort of like interior sort of excess to the exterior, and I'm curious like what you're thinking about in that sort of like interior space, or like like most of the work that you presented seems to be about this kind of like exteriority, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think about interiority.
I guess we were thinking of how could we improve upon Los in redoing the model. And I think that the image that we showed with the 5 o'clock shadow on the exterior of Villa Muller kind of demonstrates that. Additionally, like the exterior of the model is also its own kind of interior because it's a model, it's on the inside, so it can kind of behave in a slightly different way. But there's a slide that we didn't show actually, a project by Jason Payne, Raspberry Fields, that we're kind of thinking of this quality of fur as a material. Do you want to speak to that, Jimenez?
So the question is the relationship between exteriority and interiority. I mean, I think, I don't know, the idea of inner lining and outer lining is something that I really care about. And, earlier on I was talking about architecture as a backdrop for life. And so if the inner lining is almost a constant soundtrack for, the mood that you're in, that's how I would say I think about it. I can't really speak to how Beatrice thinks about it.
Or like in the later projects, the pool party or the 12 stories, is even though everything is sort of put on the exterior, is there still like an interior component that you are thinking about, or is sort of everything from the interior laid bare on the exterior?
I don't know. Sorry.
I think we're always thinking about either a project being hard on the outside or soft on the inside, which would kind of hearken to Beatrice's comments, which are from Los's writings. So the difference between the interior condition and the exterior condition, in this case we just inverted it, where basically the harder condition of the Muller house is on the interior, because I think we're seeing it more as being static, versus when it's a model, it's something slightly different. And I think the way that people played with the model and touched the model kind of allowed it to become more of an interior in the way that Los was kind of conceiving of it.
I mean, before the questions begin, I just want to say something. I want to thank Wes for being here. Thank you, Wes, for trailing Blaze for people who like to do nonsense. Wes drew a lot of comics earlier on, if you don't know, and later when Wes began to transition into more building work, I don't know. I remember seeing you at a lecture. This would have been 18 years ago, and it was very inspiring to me. And thank you for being here.
Hello. Well, first of all, thanks for the lecture or conversation, actually. And I find this idea of finding the link between high culture and popular culture fascinating, and linking it to the issue of preservation and the fact that when buildings are not liked or cared for by users, they tend to fall into decay, as we have seen. I'm wondering if, for you, exploring issues of cuteness, of humor, of anthropomorphism as well in your buildings is a way to add that cultural relevance layer to your work, or even pop culture to your work, which is an issue that has been neglected, I would say, neglected by architects today for the sake of abstraction or intellectualism. So, yeah.
It sounds like a question that the metamodernists could answer. I mean, there's a obscure philosophy group in the Netherlands. They're at the moment they're talking about the relationship between people who are actually ironic or accidentally ironic. And so I think the idea that irony is a rhetorical device for a very critical rhetorical device for postmodernism, and or even the idea of ultra referencing as a postmodern project requires irony with or without sincerity. But I think they're outlining maybe contemporary sensibility where people are just accidentally, because people like I would say me, for instance, who grew up on stuff like Seinfeld or Simpsons. I don't know how to talk any other way. The way that I know how to talk when I'm skeptical of something is sounding ironic, even though I may be a very sincere person. And so I think I don't know if that directly talks to what you're talking about, but I think this embracement of things that are influencing from pop culture or high culture or both is something that's really difficult for at least for me to distinguish anymore. In fact, at this point in time, I'm about to refuse to distinguish them.
Hello. I was wondering, could you explain your loose-fitting idea again, in particular in relation to the ill-fitting and then the well-fitting, then the loose-fitting idea?
I think this is a question for Polly Afflebaum and Stan Allen. Maybe you can pick up points and lines. And I think they talk about loose-fitting really well, or Stan Allen does anyway.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
At some point in your presentation, I saw your desktop folder of several knockout jokes, and I'm just curious if you had
I'm really glad that you caught that.
That's yours.
I'm just really glad that you caught that. Did you catch any of the others? I don't feel the need to explain myself. I guess maybe that brings up a notion of Easter eggs, which we do a lot in our work, and it runs kind of parallel to ideas that we have about referencing history and theory. So this is another Easter egg. It's kind of mostly, how do Easter eggs really work? They kind of more serve for the amusement or the entertainment of the really close readers, and we like to think of ourselves as being really close readers, and we try to be really close readers. So as a means of entertaining some of our colleagues who might also be very close readers, we like to kind of place things in our work for people to get. So, nice job.
I mean, those who like comic books probably also know that this is within the tradition of comics. For super hardcore fans, they might dig up, let's say, like cross-universe references between story arcs, and it's something that I really appreciate. But I think if you guys are interested in the practice of sprinkling Easter eggs, it's I think it's okay when no one catches them. Otherwise, you're just going to be very disappointed. Okay.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you.